so that we can post this to our website when we are finished. So that has started. So with that, I will turn things over to Mr. Pacetta. Again, thanks for joining us.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clancy. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. When we scheduled this session a few days ago, we knew that going into this, we wouldn't know exactly what information we'd have. We just felt like it was important to get some dates on the calendar where we could start interacting with our school community and let people know up to the minute, literally up to the minute, what information do we have at our disposal. Just since we've announced this meeting, that this whole process has taken several twists and turns. And so I'd like to bring everybody up to speed with what has really been this roller coaster of information that really has unfolded over the last 5 or 6 days. It seems like longer, but a lot of the craziness that's been happening has really unfolded over the really less than a week at this point. So we will, as we get into sort of a little bit of the history of of what's been happening in the last week. So these are the things that we know. We know that for many, many weeks now, we've been led to believe by numerous statements, by things that have appeared in writing, by numerous sources, that we were told to expect additional guidance from the state level regarding expectations for all school districts heading into the new year based on the COVID situation. So we, like every district, was really eagerly anticipating that information so that we could digest whatever information came out and make sense of the plan, much like we had done last summer. We took the guidance that was offered and tried to put it into a usable form that would make sense for our school community. Everybody was thrown a curveball on August 5th, just 5 days ago, when the New York State Department of Health indicated that they would not be providing additional guidance for schools. Again, this was a huge departure from what every school in the state had anticipated and had been told many times for weeks. The guidance had been premised for weeks. And then on the 5th, we were told that now the responsibility would be placed on local authorities to make decisions regarding the reopening of school. That we found this pretty disturbing because the basis for the lack of oversight from the governor's office and the Department of Health was cited as being that the governor no longer had emergency powers, and therefore it was really not something that they were in a position to be able to provide school districts. The problem with that explanation is that his emergency powers had actually been abolished back in June. So literally weeks and weeks had gone by. Nothing had changed as far as the emergency powers that the governor's office exercised, but yet schools were put in a tough position by having that be cited as the reason for why they weren't going to be providing additional guidance. So that's a little bit of the history of the last few days. And now let's fast forward to this morning. About mid-morning, the state education department stepped in and said that they would now be issuing, in a relatively short time period, guidance for districts throughout the state to make sense of everyone's COVID plans for the fall. So, again, to recap, we thought up until 5 days ago that we were awaiting guidance. Then we were told 5 days ago, guidance will not be coming. You now need to make decisions at the local level. And then this morning we were told, for lack of guidance from the governor's office and the state health department, State Education Department felt that it was essentially their duty to be able to step in and to provide some kind of clear, coherent guidance to school districts as we stand on the verge, on the doorstep of a new year. So some things that had been in place since the announcement, when everyone was under the impression that it would now be, the decision-making would be moved to the local level, there were a number of meetings taking place around the state. One most significant for us was a meeting just last night with Madison County officials, including Department of Health officials, members of the Board of Supervisors and Health Department, regional superintendents, and school board members. And it was a fairly wide-ranging conversation as we tried to work to understand and digest the information that had come from the state level. So a lot of conversation about whose role is it to make what decisions, what's the basis for those decisions. There were still some questions. And in fact, earlier today, I received correspondence from the County Health Director's office asking local school districts to provide specific questions in writing to them, and they would try to get back to us with some additional information. So the meeting yesterday didn't really yield many definitive answers to things, but there were a lot of things that were brought up, and certainly we're now in the process of forwarding questions to our local health department, and we will certainly share those answers as those answers are coming back to us. Other things that we know in the meantime, for lack of state guidance, there were references to what the Center for Disease Control and the American Association of Pediatrics, which were the two recognized agencies that are referred to frequently in the guidance documents that have come out in the last year and a half. They've come out with some statements. Their comments indicated that they're proponents of universal masking, even for vaccinated individuals. That was an across-the-board recommendation for universal masking. We also know when we're talking about what are the local experts saying, Dr. Stephen Thomas from Upstate Medical University, who is, I think, widely acknowledged as our regional expert, also had come out in an interview over the week that was published over the weekend, indicating that he was recommending masking. But there were still questions about that, and still remain questions about whose decision is it, and is there going to be some kind of uniform additional guidance? Well, we got that answer earlier today. It sounds like State Education Department is going to be that agency, for lack of the governor's office or the state health department being that agency. The bottom point on the screen, State Education Department has been very adamant over a number of weeks now in their comments, their public comments. They are proponent and huge advocate of everyday in-person instruction. They view that is the current state of education in New York State, that it is essential that students get back to school. Our concern is that kids get back to school, but do it in a safe way. But that has been their consistent message, that really, barring anything unforeseen, that is the expectation, that students be back in the classroom. This takes us to, what are some of the remaining questions? Well, there are a lot of questions, and we were quite frankly hoping that in the next couple of days, we would be able to offer our district plan on the heels of having the health department meeting, several community session with our staff members, our Board of Education meeting. We were hoping that we were getting to the point where we could disseminate our plan. Things changed this morning with the notification that the State Education Department would be issuing additional guidance. Districts like Canastota and several and others around the state and in our region received information from our regional BOCES that it probably does make sense for us to hold off in making any definitive decisions, because we really need to see what the state education department is going to come out with. Any type of declaration at this point would be premature, and we would likely end up having to reverse some of the things that we're telling you, and we don't want to do that. It's already been a confusing situation to begin with. The last thing we want to do is issue what we think are plans today, and then in a couple of days say, never mind, forget what we said. New guidance came from state education department, and this is our modified plan. So what are the categories that we know are going to be, or anticipate are going to be addressed by the commissioner in the state education department? Because again, I know people are having all kinds of questions about many topics related to this. Things that were specifically mentioned in the letter today. The letter, and I quote, says that we anticipate forthcoming guidance will address questions around the wearing of masks, social distancing, remote learning, transportation, community transmission tracking, etc. So a wide range of topics, things that most of the questions are centering around that we've been receiving. That's going to be addressed in this updated guidance from the governor. So as much as we'd like to be able to give you firm answers today, it really would be premature and probably irresponsible if we were to try to venture into that territory, given the fact that guidance we anticipate this week will probably be coming out on each of those topics. Once the guidance comes out, we still need to digest that information. We're not sure how prescriptive the guidance will be. So are we pretty much going to be in a situation where we're told to execute this plan and we're just sharing with you that information? Or in some cases, is there going to still be some wiggle room for discretion at the local level? That we don't know. We just don't have that answer. Again, it's been a wild roller coaster with mixed messages and different agencies at different times weighing in on this. But as of now, is that at 5:47 on August 10th, that is the most up-to-date information I have, that we are within the next few days going to be getting an update from the state education department that will largely guide our actions as we go into the school year. What I will say is agree or disagree with whatever we get. And at this point, we don't know what we're going to get. But I do think it is a positive sign that at least some governing agency has stepped up to the plate and will actually be providing some more definitive guidance and information on this topic, rather than just have it be this sort of all over the place, people doing different things and interpreting things differently. That's always concerning, because you get comparisons between one district and the other. Well, so-and-so district is doing this, why aren't we? They're doing that, why aren't we? Well, I think the guidance that's coming out will probably go a long way in limiting some of the discrepancies and variations that you'll see from district to district, since we will all be expected to adhere to some more uniform set of guidance. Mr. Clancy, Mr. Panuccio, any of our other administrators, are there other things you'd like to add?
I do not. I think we have to wait to see what the guidance says when it comes out.
Yeah, we're in a similar but different position than we were last year. Last year, we had specific guidance that we followed. This year, as Mr. Becerra shared, we were expecting that. We're told we weren't getting it. And now this morning are told that we're going to have some guidance Friday, or excuse me, hopefully by the end of the week. Um, and I know Mr. Becerra has shared this in previous meetings. I think the thing that has helped us proceed logically through this process for the last year and a half has been to follow that guidance that has come from sometimes from the Department of Health, sometimes from the State Education Department, sometimes from our school attorneys and our school physician. Those are the folks that have helped us to inform our decisions. And that's the process that we have followed, and I think we're going to be following moving forward. So that guidance will help us make some of the decisions that we need to make soon.
Yeah, as a follow-up to that point, I think it's an important point because that's probably one of the most common questions that we have is, well, why doesn't, government or school or whoever stay out of our business? It's a personal decision, right? That's one of the most common statements that we receive. And there are a few answers to that, I guess. And one that I would start with is, as is in any element of our society, there is a balancing of rights of people. And so this is not unique to the COVID situation. If you look at every aspect of how our society works, it's a balancing of different rights and responsibilities of citizens. And so that's why the school district, it's beyond what my personal opinion is, or Mr. Panuccio's, or Mr. Clancy's, or the school board. It is beyond that, because we're having to look at things as a whole, and we're having to make decisions not based on necessarily what I'm going to do with my child or you're going to do with your child, but the collective good. We do have to look at it through a different lens. And so when some people say, well, for example, I don't want my child to wear a mask, or I want my child to this or that, there's a lot of factors that are involved. And some people will argue one way, and some people will argue the other. That's why in our situation, we have to rely on more than just my opinion.
So
I'm not an infectious
let it be the parents'
disease.
decision.
I'm not an infectious disease expert, nor most people. And so part of our process is that we need to lean on the experts of the people who are the acknowledged experts, as every district is compelled to do, as every attorney who's worth their salt advises their clients to do. That you can't just go rogue and do whatever. If there is guidance, for example, from a governing agency or an agency that is acknowledged as a source of information that needs to be listened to, then that has to be obviously heavily considered in as we make our decisions. So we realize that everybody isn't always going to agree with those decisions, but it has to be through the lens of what can we defend? What can we defend if, and what is there evidence for? And that's really the situation that the school district is in, and every school is in. I think pretty much every school is dealing with the same issue. This type of issue, you're just not going to get 100% agreement. You're going to have people who feel differently on different sides of how to best handle this issue.
So why not let the parents make the choice
That was
about wearing a mask?
Right. That was the point I was just making.
If none of them are agree, why can't it be somebody's choice? If they don't want to wear a mask, they can wear one. If my kids don't want to wear a mask, they don't have to wear them. It's plain and simple.
Yeah, I'm trying to answer the question. So that was what we had just tried to address, that there's a balancing of rights. And when there's a discrepancy,
well, you're not balancing rights. You're giving one person the right, not the other.
we're having to
just to make that clear.
We're having to refer to the experts who will weigh in and say, at what point is it appropriate for there to be a uniform decision made versus at what point is it appropriate to allow for individual decisions to be made. At different times in the course of the last year and a half, the guidance has varied. At times, we've been told this is what you need to do. Okay, we've tried to do that and implement it the best we can. At other times, the guidance of the experts is that we can use judgment, that we could, in fact, solicit our parents in our community for information. Obviously, we're always interested to hear what our parents are thinking or are concerned with, but
Then why aren't we meeting?
there are
Why aren't we
times
meeting in person?
because
Just talking about it.
there are times that we are
You're hiding behind the
advised,
camera.
there are times that we're advised to account for the public opinion, and there are times that we're told, here is the approved guidance that the state is expecting you as a public school district to follow. And so what we're saying is, when we have the state education department guidance, that will be what we're compelled to follow. If they say, open the door and say that you need to solicit information as we have in the past from our community, then that could weigh into it. When they say this is the expectation as a public school district, then that is essentially our marching orders. And so until we have that final directive that we now anticipate will be coming this week, we're just speculating. But
The last thing I'll say is there is substantial evidence displaying the harmful and physical effects, physical and psychological aspects of mask wearing, especially in children. We should be able to make a choice as parents whether they want to wear one or not, because there's plenty of evidence that wearing masks 9 hours a day make kids sick.
So again, to reinforce the point that we've made several times, we're awaiting the guidance so that we understand the parameters that we have. It is a little bit premature for us to say we can or can't do whatever until we have that guidance public.
So we'll continue only to listen to this guidance and only half of the parents in the community, essentially, or more.
Well, here's the thing. Sometimes decisions.
I'm down at football practice right now with all the kids are on top of each other, not wearing a mask. Same with baseball for the last 4 months. Now we're going to put them back in school when they've been together the last 5 months without wearing a mask. That's going to be the guidance.
Well, first of all, again, the guidance isn't coming from us. And I think most people are fairly understanding of the fact that we're put in a position where we're needing to understand what the guidance is that is being sent to us.
I'm just saying, please.
I'm not necessarily saying that everything always makes sense in the way that it's laid out, but we can't ignore it, is what I'm saying.
You can't ignore the parents either. Absolutely not.
No, we're not ignoring parents. We'll listen to parents, but if not everything doesn't come down to, everything isn't as simple as let's just take a vote. That's not the way it works. At times,
I didn't say take the vote. I said you have a choice.
Right. So when we have a better understanding of what the guidance is, to what degree choice can be involved, then we can make a better decision. So your point, you've made your point. I understand where you're coming from. And I've tried to make my point that it's a balancing of rights and responsibilities. And when you have disagreement of people, that's why we have these types of agencies who will step in, not just in issues with schools, but in society in general. So I think if we look at it in a broader way, this is the way, our society and our system works. And we're not always going to agree with it. I'm not, here's the other thing. That's not my sole decision. It's not the school board's decision. We are going to be given information, then we can make decisions based on what comes out of that. We can't just do anything that we want to do that isn't in line with the the expectations for a public school district. Mr. Clancy, is there?
There's a few comments, but sorry, I'm just trying to read as they're coming in here. Just a few comments, not really questions, but a few comments from some parents acknowledging that the guidance that we're receiving is the guidance that they would like to follow, and that there are parents who would like their children to wear masks as well. But no specific questions, so I would ask the floor if there's any other questions from any folks. If you do have a question, you can unmute yourself.
The other thing,
Oh, sound like somebody was unmuting. I did just get a question
Yep.
too. So.
Yeah, it might have been me. I was wondering if there are going to be any remote options available this year for families who have high risk children and high risk family members.
sure, yep, and it's a good question. And again, up until this point, the state had talked about, largely the expectation would be that kids would be back in school. We now were told again today that there would be update in that comment about remote learning options. So I think that door is, has been opened by those comments as far as, what is or isn't going to be available. So as soon as that guidance comes out from the commissioner, we can give you a better answer. We're not trying to be evasive, but last year, for example, this is one of those cases where whether the school wanted to or didn't want to, we needed to be able to make certain accommodations because that was an option given to families. What the state has essentially said this year is the plan was not to make it as open, and that it would have to be more potentially than just a choice. Do you want to have your kid remote or in school? With the comments from today, I just don't know. Could there be some kind of move back to having more of a choice for parents? Possibly, we just don't know. But to your point, though, if there is a specific medical issue, documented issue, that's could potentially be a whole different story. There may be, good and valid reasons why, even if the state does not open the door for remote, just as there is for any other health condition, there may be times when some other type of arrangement is necessary. So I think that's the thing that if you can communicate your specific concerns to the guidance office or the principal in your building, then we can start working through what scenarios would make sense or what types of accommodations we can make for your child.
So my follow-up question would be, if remote is not an option, how much of a heads up will be needed for parents to give, or you letting us know if we need to make the choice to homeschool?
We're gonna turn around and try to make sense of the guidance as soon as it comes out. So I would anticipate, I would be surprised if we wouldn't be able to give some, again, this is provided that the guidance comes out this week. I would think that by next week, we would be able to get something pretty firm out to families so they would be able to adjust accordingly. That's all provided that we have, guidance in the next couple of days. We would try to turn it around very quickly so you can make plans. We don't want this to be a case where it's, we're coming up on Labor Day weekend and people are still wondering what's happening.
So if remote is an option, would it look like last year, or would there be improvements made? And that's my last question. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, I think, well, were you going to say something, Mr. Clancy?
Yeah, it's one of the things that we've been talking about, this summer, not knowing exactly what was going to have to be required for the fall. We're looking at a couple options, and I think it would look different as far as trying to find a way to make it work so that we can continue to provide servicing here. Last year, we took some of our teachers offline. We had to do it in order to provide remote instruction. So some of our teachers became remote instructors. One of the options we're looking at is to use a regional BOCES kind of setting for students who would be remote. So what that would mean is potentially a student from Canastota would be participating in a remote class virtually with students from another district as a part of a fourth grade classroom, for example. And the reason that we're looking at that option is because there were some things that we weren't able to do last year because we had to take several teachers offline to provide remote instruction. We really need to be able to provide those services this year. So that would free those teachers up in order to provide those services. So that would be a potential difference. That's not confirmed yet, but that's one of the options we're exploring. Which, again, I don't have a lot of the details to share, but the length of day is one of the things that we're looking at as well, because students who were remote last year had a shortened day depending on the grade level. So that's just information we'll have to share as we can kind of firm up what we need to offer and what we're able to offer and how we can offer some of those things. So I know that's not a super clear answer, but we're looking at some options and we'll share them as soon as we can. I'm just going to go back to some of the questions. There was a question about hybrid instruction being an option this year. I think Mr. Becerra addressed that answer with the remote answer or question, kind of in the same category. The kind of schooling that we are either required to offer or are able to offer is going to be coming with that guidance that will be provided. So we'll share that as soon as we can. Another question, are the daily screenings and the same extensive list of reasons not to send kids to school with required testing still anticipated, or is that too soon? So I think this question is referring to the daily text and email that was sent to parents every morning, asking a series of questions about their children, whether or not they had been exposed or been tested, and ask questions about some of the COVID symptoms. Again, that's another one we don't have a firm answer for yet. It's certainly a possibility that that practice would have to continue going into the school year. Anybody else have anything to add to that question?
I would agree with that. I mean, I think some things that we've added over time just probably make sense while we're still dealing with the pandemic. You know, not that they're easy measures, but they're measures that people are at least used to, and it's a way of trying to minimize exposure and potential quarantine situations.
Another question about the first day of school. Right now, the first day of school, first day of classes for students is Tuesday, September 7th, the day after Labor Day. And that, forgive me if I missed one, so please unmute yourself if I did miss a question, but that is what I have so far.
Mr. Clancy, just a quick point of clarification. I know that somebody was talking about remote learning and homeschooling. Both those terms were used, and you know, some people may know this, and some people may not. But remote learning and homeschooling are two different things. Remote learning, it would be certainly via the school, you know, via our own curriculum, and homeschooling being a curriculum developed from the parent or from home.
Yes, they are different. Thank you. This is a question, I think, for one of the principals. Is parent orientation still planned for the last week of August? Is the first part of the question. I'm guessing that's probably well, I don't know. Maybe it's the kindergarten, pre-K, maybe it's the 7th and 9th orientation. So can you both answer that question, Jenny and Jay, please? And then there's a follow-up.
Sure, I'm happy to. We have a tentative pre-K orientation for parents only slated for August 23rd, and kindergarten orientation slated for the evening of Wednesday, August 25th. again, contingent upon guidance that we receive, that may have to be virtual like we did last year, but we'll certainly keep parents posted on that plan.
So the follow-up was, is there a remote option? Sorry, Jay, I'll let you go in a sec. Is there a remote option? And I think that's something that we're working through still, but right now it's planned to be in person. Correct, Jenny? Okay.
Correct.
And Jay,
Yeah, and likewise, we're trying to figure that out as well. Right now it's scheduled for September 2nd, which is a Thursday. We are looking to certainly bring in the new 7th graders because we do believe that they need an orientation. We're looking to do a meet the parents night with the 9th graders to talk about the difference between middle school and high school. And then we are determining, in the middle of determining how we want to do the open house otherwise. We did it virtually last year and we actually got a very good participation and are weighing the options of doing another virtual open house for the rest of the building. So that is to be determined, but you can plan on September 2nd being the night of our orientation.
thank you, Jay and Jenny.
Do you have anything else?
A question about 4th grade. Is there, I think, asking about an orientation or an open house. I don't believe there's an orientation, a formal orientation for 4th grade students who are coming from Southside to Robert Street. There is an open house scheduled on, I'll make sure I give the right date here. Wednesday, September 1st. That's the kind of traditional, we call it open house. It is an open house, but it's also kind of a meet and greet with teachers. So Jenny, I'm going to read these right off of the calendar and you correct me if the time is incorrect. So on the 1st, from 4 to 5 p.m., Peterborough Street will be open for, is it just KN1 or is pre-K also included in that, Jenny?
Pre-K would also be included in that open house.
Pre-K, KN1. And Southside follows at 5 p.m., 5 to 6 p.m. Southside would be open for, well, 2nd graders, and then 3rd graders. We will send some communication to families about that one because obviously there's that split this year because of the capital project. But the Southside time is slated 5 to 6 p.m. And then the Robert Street open house is from 6 to 7 p.m. And those times are staggered just so we can try to provide families with opportunities to visit different buildings for kids who maybe, or families who have children in different schools. So you're not conflicted trying to decide which building to go to. So again, not a specific orientation for 4th graders, but that's an opportunity for those kiddos to come to school to meet their teachers and walk around the building a little bit. Has the school calendar for 21-22 been published? So I'm assuming that's this calendar, which we are in the final stages of editing. So no, it hasn't been mailed yet. It'll be mailed in the next couple weeks before the school year begins. There is, I believe it's on our website, there is a program calendar. It's the one-page calendar that indicates breaks and holidays and things like that. But the full-size month-to-month calendar will be sent home soon.
Another thing that we can add that we know now, I know some people have been asking about when is our new Robert Street principal, Mrs. White, starting. And so we were able to, now we have a date where she'll be with us starting full time. And that is Monday, much sooner than that, August 23rd. So Mrs. White will be with us as our Robert Street principal. In the meantime, if there are questions specific to Robert Street, you still can contact Mrs. Rice at the office, and then we can either get your questions answered from Mrs. Henner, who's serving as our interim, principal, or Mrs. DeGeorge, who is our new guidance counselor, and Robert Street, or whoever makes sense. But so that's some good news that she'll be here, and we'll be here a little bit before actually the start of the year. So good news.
Another question, right now there's no vaccine for children under 12. Excuse me. So if there is an outbreak, or if there's, I'm assuming this question is asking if there's a situation where there's several individuals who become infected with COVID, do we have to shut the building down like we had to do at certain times last year?
We now know from experience last year that it really depends on each individual circumstance. There were times, I think there were a couple of times last year where we did, decide to close a building. Most of the times it was more isolated, where it was, potentially a classroom was impacted or some individuals were impacted. And that really depends on the contact tracing process that we work hand in hand with the Madison County Health Department on. So it really depends on whatever guidance is in place at the time that they're using, in terms of how close were people, for how long were people in close proximity, was it multiple days that there was exposure, that sort of thing. So I think the question to that, it's a complicated one, in that it really depends. More often than not, it meant we didn't have to close school. I would say to close school, it would mean that we would, if we were being advised to do so by the health department, if they were concerned that there may be large scale or widespread exposure, that might be a cause for us to take a look at that. Also, if there was, for example, an issue with being able to staff the buildings appropriately. But outside of those really two scenarios, the vast majority of the time, we've still been able to function while isolating and quarantining individuals who may have been exposed. And for the most part, that worked for the vast majority of last school year.
Yep. So those, as Mr. Becerra said, those decisions are made in conjunction with the health department, and really are very circumstantial. There's a lot of things that have to be considered and a lot of questions we get asked. And then those decisions get made about what we have to do next. Right now, there are not any other questions. I know we have to wrap here in a minute or two. So unless there's anything else from the group, I know we will be doing more information sessions for parents in the community as we get this information, and as we're able to make plans, we'll share those. And
I would anticipate once we get the guidance, when we receive the guidance and take an initial look at it, we'll be able to give, probably pretty quickly, be able to establish the next public session. When we have been able to understand what's being said, we can then schedule a session and share that with you. So as Mr. Clancy said, we would get that information out as soon as we really know. So I would anticipate once the guidance is out, not too long after that, we would be able to get something on the calendar so that we can tell you where things are. We know everybody's anxious to know what's happening. We understand that this is a tough subject because people have different opinions and degrees, and we also know people are worn down by this because we've been dealing with this for a long time, especially after we thought maybe we had turned the corner as we headed into summer, the end of last school year. We're, I think, all very optimistic, and so hopefully we're getting a little bit closer to getting to a normal situation. I would ask that everybody still just try to remember that we're all wanting the same thing, and that's a great experience for our kids. And we could at times have different opinions, or sometimes it's not even, our opinion doesn't necessarily even weigh in that much if there are factors beyond our control that are dictating our actions. But we do ask for people to, try to be patient in the process and work with us as we move through this. We certainly want to address your questions. We want to, when we have the ability to do so, use your opinion and your input to shape how we've operated. We've done that in the past when we've been given the leeway to do so. And so I think our track record has been, we are a district that does try to listen to the experts in science, but we also want to balance that with working with our families and listening to their questions, concerns, opinions. That's really the balance we're trying to look for, and we do that when we're able to do that. So we thank you for your participation and your continued patience. And despite the challenges, we look forward to what I think is really going to be still a good school year, even in spite of some of the challenges. We've learned that we can adapt to very difficult situations, and certainly we all hope that we're closer to the end of this than the beginning, and I really think we are. So stay tuned for more information in the days and weeks leading up to the start of school.
Thanks, everybody, and we will be talking with you soon.